All right, welcome back, everyone, to our daily live of using the law of assumption to reclaim your supreme authority, unmask any manipulation, and really take total control of your reality. We're going to go back to the script, the workshop we've been consistently doing, which is where we really are unmasking the 3D. We're unmasking all the places we have unclaimed power from these beliefs that were implanted, that were programmed into us before we had a conscious say. What I want to start with before we go into it was something I've thought about a lot, and I've had to do a lot of repetition to try to implement it. But as I got clearer on kind of the tactics of manipulation, the tactics, the strategies of what we would call a narcissist or an abuser or gaslighting, things like that, right? I always had the thought, okay, if my outer world is reflecting my inner world, right? But we're told to ignore the 3D. You'll hear that, ignore the 3D. That's not a very tantric approach, by the way, but the point is to always put the importance on your inner world and how circumstances don't matter. It's how we respond to them, because it's only ever echoing or reflecting our old assumptions or our old belief systems. And so I remember when I was, in a it was a rough part of my relationships in general, kind of on a front, a whole. And I was trying to navigate using the law, but then also not avoiding what was happening in front of me and learning, you'll hear the term, say gray rock, black rock. There's different terms for it. But basically, as I learned about these tactics that were used growing up, and then were currently playing out in my relationships, where essentially the interactions were drawing out reactions from me. It was drawing out a very reactive response. And I felt like I had no control. I felt like I was a child again, where everything the person said and did would antagonize me. It would trigger me. And I was then giving all this energy to the outer world. And I remember, of course, drawing the conclusion, okay, so just like we're supposed to no longer give up our reactions, give up our energy to unwanted circumstances, just like you would with an abusive person, the 3D is kind of an abuser. And this is where, if we take kind of the, I guess, the underlying good and bad out of it, because this is where, again, very tantric approach, and Neville says this too, we get rid of the dualistic idea of good and evil. We get rid of the judgment of, I'm a better person, they're a worse person, or vice versa. And we see it all as states, okay? So there's a state where this outer reality is empowered, and I am inferior to it. And if I'm inferior to my outer reality, I'm going to be reacting to it. I'm going to be trying to change it. I'm going to be conditioning my responses, conditioning my self-expression to get what I think will be, peace or happiness or whatever. So both ends, right, when we're in this reactionary relationship with our 3D, with the people involved, no one's going to win either way. Whether it's the abuser or the victim and vice versa, it's still reactionary. And when we are coming into a place of true empowerment and true sovereignty with the law of assumption, then it's okay, I'm not going to give any of my energy away to the 3D ever. And it's not even we will go through the states of doing it to get our power back, and there might be some lingering resentment or some hurt. But then healing that victim self-concept is then getting to a place, and I find it's a lot easier to do once you've already gotten to a place of you have the appropriate response that you need of anger, and being yeah, that wasn't what I wanted, that was not okay, that's not going to be allowed in my life, I'm manifesting something different. Then we get to an empowered enough place and have patience with yourself, because there's been times in my life where seeing the outer reality as it didn't actually do anything to me and it was just a manifestation, there are certain times it just doesn't sit right. I'm not ready for that. During more empowered times, or if I look back on situations that don't hurt me anymore, I've done the revision. A part of me is, more empowered around it. It doesn't bother me anymore. I can see like, okay, those were assumptions playing out. It's neutral. Okay. And so we do what we can where we can. But yes, eventually, in a very empowered state, we can see, okay, those were just echoes. I don't need to take it personally. That was a state where, yeah, that person was playing out malice towards me. And that wasn't fair and that was not okay. But now that I'm coming into the state of supreme authority and I decide how others show up in my reality, I'm decreeing that. Okay, well, now I get to a place where that's just not even a thing anymore. That's not allowed anymore. But I found in my ongoing process of this, it's not like invalidating that it did happen. It did. And that wasn't cool. But now that I'm decreeing, now that I'm really deciding, now that I feel more in my body and more in control, that my outer world really is coming from me now. And the more you decree that the outer world is coming from you, the more you step into your power, then logically it does start to make sense. Now that's not going to be allowed anymore. It doesn't invalidate that it did happen. But now I'm going to the assumptions that decree the only people in my reality show up with respect for me. They are reciprocal, right? They bring love and devotion to my reality because they are me. But I do find we have to go through this process first of seeing, okay, where was I, right? Like still inferior to the 3D, to others. They were abusing me. I'll revise. I'll do what I can to reclaim my power from that, to move through the emotion, to heal and work with the inner child, to change the beliefs that created that, while still validating the pains, while still validating what happened. But then from that place, being like, and now I can change it. Now I can get to a place where, yes, I don't need to ignore my 3D anymore. But I feel like that is a phase we have to go through. But now that I'm more in my power, and I know I'm bigger than the 3D, I know that I'm more powerful than all the circumstances currently seemingly opposing me. Okay, now I'm in a more empowered place to really reclaim my energy there. And really say that no matter what is happening, I'm not going to give up my energy. My energy is too precious, and I'm always giving it back to me because it never actually makes sense to give it to the mirror. I did a whole script today that eventually I'll upload to the unmasking course, where I was revising my inner child to, instead of attach to things they love out there, or kind of like repel, say the no phase of things they don't like. It was a whole revision on how to really work with that energy and using the mind to redirect energy instead of attaching and clinging. That's where we get overly attached to the 3D because we think it loved us versus it just being a reflection of love, or repelling and being in disgust or saying no to things that hurt us that we don't like, and realizing, okay, that was just a reflection of that too. It's getting to that, yes, like self-centered, self-empowered place where I always know it's a reflection of me. It's always a reflection of love. And if it's a reflection of duality, if it's a reflection of opposition, that's me too. So it's easily changeable. It's all easily changeable. So one more thing I want to kind of point out before we go to the workshop is, at least for me, like I would retract into my inner world, right? I would, especially when things were really bad, I would, kind of go into my daydreaming, and that was my safe place. That was my safe place of, there might be chaos and hurt happening out here, but I'm just going to go dissociate. I'm going to go into my inner world and just hide. But that also then needs to lovingly, when we're in an empowered enough place, okay, then we have to say, all right, now that I know that imagination creates reality, we have to feel now safe enough, which is what all this work is doing, is getting us to feel safe enough to be this empowered and say that when I'm in my inner world, everyone is still there with me. And instead of like keeping up the appearances for the outer world, which also every time we do things like that, we're giving up our power. When we keep up our appearances for the outer world, when like if I were to think that this was the only time I was interacting with others on this level versus what I did all day on the inside, that veil is going to start coming down too, right? And as that starts to come down, there, at least to me, is a lot of relief. Like just like when you're with an animal or a good friend or someone you feel really comfortable with, and you're not, judging how you're acting, you're not judging how you're dressing, you're just gonna be. You're just gonna be. That's the state of being we're all going for, right? What would it be like when you do these inner conversations, when you're doing this inner work? You do recognize, and I've done this before in past inner conversations, where whoever you're working with or healing the relationship with, just kind of hearing them say like, no, this is the real me. This is the real me. This is what's really happening. And that's how we start to really, like take the mask off of everything, the duality off of everything. That whatever I'm doing within, like that is actually the real deal. And what can be cool about that, right, is whether it's your SP or whatever, money, health, all of that. All versions of it exists within you at all times. I find the comfort in knowing that during my most like isolating times, during my weakest times, during my times of like states of complete loneliness, like everyone was actually still there with me. And this to me is where we are revealing that the truth of everyone is not only you, but it's an unconditional love. Like they're there. Unconditional love, I think, has a weird definition. I think unconditional love is very much neutrality of like, they're just always there. They're always there on cue of like, what version are we going to say is the real thing today? And when we start to say that the inner version that you're interacting with of yourself and everyone that's with you 24/7 all day long, that's the real version. There's something really freeing around that. So it's not just the outer version is the outer version of them, the inner version is the inner version of them. No, like it's all versions of you, all versions of them. And we start to get to a place where we really can define the real version. Let me know if that makes sense. But to do this properly, we have to take the importance out of the 3D, give ourselves permission to dominate it, say like, I'm actually the one decreeing and deciding with my assumptions what you reflect out there. And it's actually through that imbalance where like before the 3D was decreeing who you are, it was technically lying to you. It was technically saying, no, I'm in charge. You have to put on appearances for me. You have to act a certain way. You have to dress a certain way. You have to be a certain way. If you want to have money, if you want to be loved, it had so many rules and regulations. It had so many conditions. And it was like, this is what it is. Deal with it. And I want you with the same like shamelessness to be like, no, this is what it is now. I am setting the tone now. I'm setting the rule. And from getting up that like power and that strength, and eventually it becomes like a very neutral thing, like real confidence, it'll get there. It's only from there where you really become the operant power that you can actually have a proper harmonic balance with the 3D. Because it's not natural for it to be in charge like this. You are here to realize that you're in charge. You are the supreme authority. It is just reflecting. So as you take on your real role, it can take on its real role. And same thing when we are revising SPs or people, when you finally say, okay, I don't want to be treated like this. I'm going to be revered. I'm going to be loved. I'm going to be respected. And I'm going to have the audacity and the courage to imagine others that do respect me and love me no matter how they've acted. Now you're bringing out the real version of them. Something I've always noticed with clients is when we would finally get into the version of their person that loved them, that was interested in them, that was always there for them, we tapped into their person's higher self, into the real like epitome of truth of their person. But they had to become the epitome of themselves, who is a deeply empowered sovereign being. And then they got the real version. All right, let's go to workshop. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. And we're going to keep playing with this.
The tension in the room is thick as you open the session. They're all here because they've experienced the subtle yet devastating tactics of narcissistic baiting, stonewalling, guilt tripping, false accusations, and more. You can see the exhaustion in their eyes, the weariness that comes from being constantly on guard, constantly questioning themselves. You begin by addressing the most common tactics, stonewalling, and passive aggressive behavior. Let's start with the silent treatment, you say, your voice smooth and commanding. The way they withdraw, the way they use silence to control you, to make you doubt yourself, to make you feel like you're the one who's done something wrong. It's a classic move, a way to make you chase after their approval, to make you feel small, unworthy. You pause, letting the words sink in, seeing the recognition in their faces. Inner Conversation LLC 2025, 43. But here's the truth. You continue, your voice rising with authority. Their silence, their withdrawal isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their fear. They're afraid of your power, of your ability to see through their games, to see them for who they really are. The moment they start stonewalling you, you don't chase them. You don't beg for their attention. You stand firm. You stay in your power. You remind yourself that you are the one in control, that you are the dominatrix of your reality. They can't silence you. They can't make you feel small. You are the one who decides how you feel, and you feel powerful, unstoppable, untouchable. Addressing the manipulation of guilt tripping and scaremongering. Next, you turn your attention to the more insidious tactics, guilt tripping and scaremongering. These are the tools of the covert narcissist, the ones who use fear and guilt to keep you in line, to make you doubt your own desires, your own power. They'll try to make you feel guilty, you say, your voice dripping with that wild, untamed confidence that makes them lean in, for wanting more, for demanding what you deserve. They'll say things like, after everything I've done for you, or I just want what's best for you, to make you feel like you're being selfish, like you're wrong for wanting what you want. But that's their game, not yours. That's their way of keeping you small, of keeping you from stepping into your power. You see the nods, the way they're starting to see the pattern, the way they're starting to understand the manipulation. And then there's the fear. You continue, your voice a low, seductive growl. They'll use threats, subtle or not, to make you afraid of losing them, afraid of what might happen if you don't do what they want. But here's the thing, fear is their weapon, but it's not yours. You don't play with fear. You don't let it control you. You face it and you dissolve it, because you are the one in charge. You are the one who decides what happens in your reality. And in your reality, there is no place for fear, no place for guilt. Only power, only authority, only you.
Okay. So, what I want to just kind of end this with, and I'd love to know in the comments your thoughts, is I was really identifying these patterns, with families and friends and like intimate relationships. The impulse to people please was so strong in me. Like I would be doing different workshops or meditations and I would be listening to it and doing it. And especially if it was around like being the priority or being the main character. And then I'd have these mornings where I'd wake up and I'd feel so empowered and so strong. And then all these needs were coming up, all these needs of like, from the imaginal acts, especially, I'd have these imaginal acts and then I would see the contrast so intensely and I'd try to talk it out with my partner and try to talk it out with others. And their manipulations would get so intense in response. And everything in me, like the inner children, would get terrified because the manipulations would be that it would be a threat of getting me in a lot of trouble because I'm crazy or I'm, threatening what I love, threatening my daughter, threatening my house, my business. Like the threats would get so loud. And I'm still experiencing the aftermath of a lot of that, where in my strongest moments, I would stay in my body, I would keep breathing, and I would just be like, this is the mirror. I'm not giving in. I'm not going to go comfort them. I'm not going to go change who I am and then feel this intense guilt like I used to, because I would do it for years. I would get really strong somewhere in my life. The threats would start coming up and then I would fold. I would cave. I would just be devastated. And I'm talking threats like homelessness, no money. I've talked about people being like, yeah, I'm going to get you in trouble. I'm going to set you up essentially, and them doing it. And eventually it's like my nervous system couldn't take it and I would fold. And so this is where I don't blame myself for that. But I've gotten myself to a place as I keep using the law and I keep, using my imagination and I keep learning how to transmute my emotions. I've been able to, when those same threats are happening, and even if I am in situations that are pretty terrifying, to go within, to kind of swallow that fear, swallow that terror, and still choose myself, and still choose my desire, and still say, I'm not moving for you anymore. I'm not moving for you anymore. In a weird way, I think because so much of the worst has actually played out in my 3D, it has built this reservoir of like, what else could you do to me that somebody hasn't done at this point? But again, to get to that place where even when the threats are happening and you get to a place where you can look at the mirror and say, but you are alive inside of me, but I decide who stays and goes, right? Like, I'm not going to bend for the mirror anymore. It's a powerful moment. And when I say it's a powerful moment, it's a terrifying, it's a very like raw moment where if you can take that terror, if you can take that fear, if you can take that anger and still stay true to yourself and grace, because there's going to be times you bend, there's going to be times you move. But if you do it more and more every time, the integrity and the love you build for yourself is so immense. And you do kind of get into this indestructible nature. And I'm not going to tell you that it means that now the worst isn't going to happen. Some things might go chaotic, but if you can stay true to yourself and let those moments fuel you and let those moments reclaim your power, you're never going to lose. You will never lose. It's just like the death by 1,000 cuts to me is every time we give ourselves up to 3D, every time we bend for the mirror instead of choosing ourselves. And then when it has all kind of fallen, but I stay true to myself, you definitely learn what your imagination can do. Like, I've been in some hostile, terrifying situations where because I had that reservoir of strength within me, because I was still doing kind of the inner conversations and I was staying true to myself and I wouldn't let the doubt eat me, like that builds superhuman strength because you are beyond human, right? So I guess I want to just normalize it if it is happening to people, if it has happened to people. The catastrophes that I've gone through, even though they were like, yeah, on the outside, pretty rough, pretty awful, because I had the ability to keep my integrity and stay true to myself and not fold and not give in to what the mirror was telling me, that is returned to us tenfold. And I don't think there's anything worse than losing yourself. There's everything to be gained from knowing who you really are, and whatever, states we go through on our way to finding ourselves, to me, it's worth it. So if anyone is going through anything incredibly scary or hard or terrifying, I would rather just normalize, like, I've been there. Go within. Go within. Folding is never the answer. Never, ever the answer. So let me know in the comments your thoughts on this, and we will continue on tomorrow.